Okay, we're live. Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises, honors, and glories due to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai Ba'ashem, Dash. Giving all honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders, great millstone. Why peace, blessings, and salutations to the elect. Okay. If you don't know, this is your brother, humble servant, Samaki Allah from the GMS Assyrians Baltimore Camp, formerly of GMS DC. And I'm coming back at you with another lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai. Lord willing, this lesson will be edifying. Actually, I was planning on going to a different topic, but, I decided to do this because that's the talk in Israel. Genesis making you have this group called Genesis making a statement about the 2/3 being beamed up, and then they're going to be dragged somewhere, Basra, right, to be burned up. And this is just another attempt of them trying to reinvent the wheel. I made a video about this earlier. They know, right? They know the proper doctrine. They understand the proper doctrine, these men. But because of rebellion, right, because they want to distance themselves from the men who taught them, okay? Let's get that disobedient to parents. They want to distance themselves from men that taught him. So they find all types of ways to make up a new doctrine that has never been heard before, so they can become deep to the people, right? Be that one group that teaches something that no other camp teaches, so they can garner attention, views, and more followers unto themselves, right? And it's frustrating, right? But it's a part of the gospel, because you have to have men that have to play those parts, right? All we can do really is just to rebuke and warn the sheep, because you're going to have new people that are coming in that may be attracted to this group, right? They get caught up in the snares, and if we don't release these videos, there'll be nobody out there to clear the confusion, to clear the dust. So let me look for that scripture where it talks about unruly being disobedient to parents. Disobedient to parents. Yep. This is 2 Timothy 3, verse 2. All right, let me start at verse 1. There's no also that in the last days perilous times shall come. Perilous times, evil times, right? For men shall be lovers of their own selves. You have this me spirit, not only within the world, right? Because we know the world is gone. They have been covered on Satan, right? That's in, I think it's Corinthians, right? It talks about the God of this world have blinded those that believe not. Okay, the God of this world is Satan, and the spiritual demon is Satan, but he works through his seed, his children, right, which are the Edomites, the so-called white people, Caucasian, whatever you want to refer to them as. And for the most part, that race, that group of people, they're responsible for all the confusion within the earth, right? And they have yet been put to justice, right? That's in them being vagabonds and escaping justice. But their time is coming. Don't worry, right? As they say in the world, I think it's every dog gets his own day, or some saying like that, right? They say that everyone gets their own day. Verse 2, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, right? Lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, right? You see that on an all-time high, because it's that unruly generation, right, that's going to be judged. Just like how it was stated in the gospel, the unruly generation. Let me look that up. Oh, this is good. Psalms, the 78th chapter. But I'm going to hold that. Let me look for this. The generation. I think it is in Matthew 24. Okay. Yeah. This is Matthew 24, verse 34. It says, "Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till what? All these things be fulfilled." And all these things are what written above, right? The prophecies. Okay. So this is that last generation, right? Um, let's see, wicked generation. Let me type that in. Wicked generation. Yep. This is Matthew 16, verse 4. It says, "A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it but the sign of prophet Jonas." Okay. So this is that generation, and the sign of prophet Jonas was him prophesying, before the destruction of Nineveh. Now, during that time, we know the whole story about Jonah, right? Um, Nineveh wasn't destroyed immediately, but the destruction still came. And it's like it unto now, right? Because, you had the 2000 period where the apostles said that, this place is going to go, or however it happened in the year 2000, and it didn't happen, right? Not the apostles, but I think I don't know the whole story, but that's what was stated. And it didn't happen, and a lot of people fell out, right, because of that, okay? But, right, the destruction will still happen because the sign of Jonah, the sign of prophesying, right, has been made clear. It's even to the point where we have entered into the elites, okay, and the talking of the elites and the councils of the elites. They don't want to, they're not going to come out and interview Rothschilds about the Hebrew Israelites, but best believe that we are the conversation around the dinner table. What can we do about these men? Okay, because according to prophecy, this is the awakening of the elect. And that's what the elites do not want. The awakening of the elect. That's why he's going to go to such lengths to microchip everyone in hopes that he will catch the elect. But it won't happen because the Most High has reserved the elect for himself. Okay. The rest of the 2/3, right? Lord willing, we're not a part of that number. Okay. They're the ones that are going to be willing to receive that oil and be a perpetual slave to Esau forever. And that's why the Most High is just going to have to waste them, okay, to the side. All right, so let's go back to 2 Timothy, 3rd chapter. It says, "For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers," right? Blaspheming the Most High, okay? Blaspheming his works, disobedient to parents, okay? You see that now. Genesis. Many other camps who were raised under the tutelage of the apostles of GMS have now turned against them, okay? Just changing things in the doctrine that were not taught. What happens to continue the things that thou hast learned and being assured of it? I guess that all goes out the window when you finally break away from a camp and do your own thing. Unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce despisers of those that are good. They despise the real men of the Lord, and they want to, they essentially want to impose, right, what they believe is good on the people, okay? And we'll see, from what I've heard, right, a lot of these groups, they don't really last long, okay? They end up breaking up and, shit happening to them. So we'll see. We'll see what happens to them, Okay, so let's go into the 2/3, right? Because they were talking about how the 2/3 will will be beamed up. Oh boy. 2/3. That's in the book of Zechariah, the 11th chapter. 13, excuse me. Right? So they're saying that the 2/3 are going to just somehow be beamed up, right? Transferred over here to America. This is Zechariah 13, verse 8. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashmi Ashai, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, 2/3, right? But the third shall be left therein. Okay? So in that land, it's talking about America, 2/3 will be cut off and die. All right. Now, this brings me back to a question that I asked Elder Kasap from GMSDC camp. I asked him what's going to happen to the 2/3 around outside of America. And he said, that's a really good question. Because at that time, I was still learning. I was curious about the scriptures. I'm still learning now, right? That eagerness for learning hasn't stopped. Recently, I've been learning about about the resurrection, because that's a subject, right, that I want to understand better, essentially. Understand better and be more knowledgeable in. Okay, so I decided to take the time, rightly divine the word of truth. Okay, and he expounded on the scripture, the rebels, right? The scriptures talk about the rebels, the 2/3 outside of America. Okay, look, all the evildoers of Israel will be cut off. Okay, all the evil. In fact, let's go to Ezekiel, the 22nd chapter. All right. I'm going to start at verse 17. And the word of the Lord, Yahweh Ashai, came unto me, saying, Son of man, the house of Israel is to me become dross, right? So they have become an inferior metal. All they are brass and tin and iron and lead. In the midst of the furnace, they are even the dross of silver. And the dross, right, is pretty much the unwanted parts. Let's look up the meaning of a dross, right? Something regarded as worthless rubbish. There you go. Okay. So the dross, the chaff, the debris, that's stuff that's unwanted, the lesser things of that material. Okay? So Israel has become the unwanted parts, even of silver. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Bashim Yahshai, because ye are all become dross. Behold, therefore I will gather you into the midst of Jerusalem, right? Oh, Ezekiel the 9th chapter, set a mark upon them that sigh and cry, but in those after my own hearing, right? Let's go to that, Ezekiel the 9th chapter. Okay. Those that are not sighing and crying, the unwanted, the undesirables. This is Ezekiel the 9th chapter, or Ezekiel, right? Ezekiel, right? However people say it. Ezekiel, right, the 9th chapter, verse 5. And it says, and to the others he said in my hearing, go ye after him through the city, right, and smite. Let's start at verse 4. And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, right, through the midst of Jerusalem. And, yeah, through the midst of Jerusalem, right, the midst of Jerusalem is really the people. Because Jerusalem has become a habitation of the heathen, right? It's desolate. So barely, if not any, Israelites are dwelling there and dwelling there in righteousness. So Jerusalem is a people before it's a place. And set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Right? That sigh and cry for all the wickedness, okay, that's being happened. That's the elect, They're crying continually. The souls of the just complain continually. That's in the book of Revelation. And to the others he said in my hearing, go ye after him through the city. So the 2/3, they're delighted in captivity. They're delighted in slavery. They don't want change. Earlier I was just watching a video from the Elder Manasseh about this. Let me show you guys. This thing, right? I don't even know what it is, but the woman or whatever that thing is, this video right here, have tattoo all over her neck, or him. I don't know what this thing is. Okay? So someone like this is saying that we make the black community look bad. But here you are, you're looking like a complete degenerate. But yeah, we make you look bad. Okay, okay. And I do somewhat can see her point because you do have camps out there that don't have the proper conduct, right? They come out and just say any old type of shit. They're renegades, okay? They don't have proper teachers to instruct them on how to conduct themselves right within the ministry. Conduct is very important. So when they go out there, they just yell anything, okay? Not being seasoned right with their speech. You know, Paul always said, well, let your speech be seasoned with salt, that you may know how to answer every man. You know, have an answer for him that reasoneth. Okay, so you have your speech has to be. You can't just go out there and just say any old thing. All right. And that's the problem with a lot of you jakes out there. You grab a garment, you see men teaching, you grab some fucking military boots or whatever that shit is, Timberlands, okay? You get an all black outfit with some cargo pants, and you just go out there marching, you know, looking dusty as fuck with your t-shirt fringes, and just start spewing nonsense, okay? Not being followed by the Spirit, okay? Just being complete carnal, because you think that this is just some Black Panther movement and we're coming to liberate all of our people. And then you see any old nation that's walking by, you just cursing the fuck out. Meanwhile, they're minding their own business. All right? Why? Because you're not seasoned with salt. You're not being led by the Spirit. Okay? And these will be the same guys that will fold, will be the first ones to fold when all hell breaks loose. Or not even that, when they make the microchip. They're going to be the first ones to fold. All that Hebrew Islam is going to go out the window. And they're going to go back to being a nigga. If they ain't already, you know. Just putting that out there through the Spirit. Verse 5. And to the others he said, on my errand, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Right? Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. Hey! Be quiet. But come not near any men upon whom is the mark, and begin in my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. Okay, so there you go. All right, the 2/3 are going to be slayed. So let's go back to Ezekiel, the 22nd chapter. This is Ezekiel 22nd, 22 actually. And I'm going to start verse 19. It says, therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because ye are all become dross, behold, therefore I will gather you into the midst of Jerusalem, right? As they gathered silver and brass and iron and lead and tin into the midst of the furnace, to blow the fire upon it, to melt it. Oh my goodness. You know, that fire is the nuclear destruction, right? So will I gather you in mine anger and in my fury, I will leave you there and melt you, okay? And this is referring to the inferior metals of our people, the impure metals, those that did not take the chastising, right, of the Lord. You know, let me get this scripture. The scripture talks about what suffering as a Christian and not as an evildoer. Our people are suffering. They're being chastised, but they're not being chastised for righteousness. That's the difference, okay? All you niggas talk about the hood, you know, our people are suffering, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well deserved. They're suffering for their wickedness. They're not suffering as a Christian, okay? This is 1 Peter 4, verse 16. It says, yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify the Most High on his behalf. Let's start at verse 15. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. You know, a gossiper, someone who likes to intervene in people's matters and start, you know, spreading rumors. The Most High hates that. You know, he hates all these things. And that's what the people in the world do. That's why, you know, as I get older in this truth, I just hate talking to people because, you know, all of you guys are just enemy combatants, honestly. But because of my job, because the kind of work that I do, I have to learn to hide and put a mask over my face, and pretend that I'm cool with these people. But deep down, man, I despise these people. Okay, the way they think, the way they operate, how they behave is just contrary to the conduct of the scriptures. All right. As the scripture says, walk in wisdom towards them that are without. These people don't have the wisdom, so we have to use and use wisdom twofold. It's easier using wisdom with a brother because you both are on the same page. So, you know, issues can be resolved quickly, right? But when it's with people in the world, oh boy, oh boy, you know, may the force be with you. That's all I can say. So yeah, our people, they're suffering as murderers, not as Christians. Okay? That's the difference between us, the hopeful elect, and the impure, inferior metals, the two thirds. Okay, so let's read Ezekiel the 22nd chapter again. It says, yea, verse 20, it says, as they gather silver and brass and iron and lead and tin into the midst of the furnace to blow the fire upon it, to melt it, so will I gather you in my anger and in my fury, and I will leave you there and melt you. Yea, I will gather you and blow upon you in the fire of my wrath, and ye shall be melted in the midst thereof. As silver is melted in the midst of the furnace, so shall ye be melted in the midst thereof, and ye shall know that I, the Lord, Yahweh shall have poured out my fury upon you. Okay? So the two thirds, they're not going to be beamed up and this and that. They're going to be left there in that land, okay, to be melted with that fire. All right, let's go to the book of Revelation. Shall not enter into the kingdom. Yep, this is Revelation, the 22nd chapter. And let's start at verse 8. It says, but the fearful and the unbelieving, right? Ooh, let's start at verse 6, actually, because I want to get the duality. You got the elect, and then you got the impure metals. And he said unto me, right, it is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. This is Yahushai. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. Right, and that's the elect. They're thirsting, okay? And they receive the water of life freely, which is this word. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, okay? Even the nations. And I will be his power, and he shall be my son. So we have been adopted, right? Romans, the 8th chapter, talks about we being adopted as sons unto the Most High. But the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers, right? All the wicked and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, all these people shall have their part in a lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is what? Which is the second death. Okay, the second death. And that second death is going to be by fire, because the first death was what? By water. The Most High flooded the world. Okay, but this time it's gonna flood the world with fire. And a lot of unfortunate souls are going to be caught up into that judgment. Isaiah the 34th chapter talks about that. Okay, so all these different individuals, right? They're not going to enter into the kingdom. Okay, these wicked ninjas that that despise order. Give me a second. Ooh, that's a nice one. Proverbs 17, verse 11. An evil man seeketh only rebellion. Therefore, a cruel messenger shall be sent against him. That cruel messenger is the angel. That's Exodus. Okay. I can't find it. Let me get this other scripture right here. Talking about the rebels, right? Purge. It's important that I get this as well because just for the sake of the lessons, since we're talking about 2/3, I might as well get the 2/3 that are outside of America. This is Ezekiel 20th chapter, and let me start at verse. This is verse 36. Yeah, let me start with verse 30. It says, "As I live, saith the Lord Yahweh, surely with a mighty hand, and with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out, will I rule over you." Right? This is Matthew. Those that would not have me reign. No, I think that's Luke. Those that would not have me reign, bring them hither and slay them before me. Okay? Because during the time of Egypt, the Lord delivered us, even the unbelievers. You had Israelites that were carrying idols, leaving Egypt. Okay, and the Most High allowed that just so they can get wasted, right, in the wilderness, and only a few entered into the promised land. But this go around, the Lord is not even going to think twice about beaming up, Tay Tay and Gloctavius and Shaniqua. All right. Now, if any of you brothers and sisters bear those names, don't get offended. Okay. You should know who I'm referring to. I'm talking about the undesirables. The people, right, that are mocked at in society, the degenerates, okay? I'm talking, when I try to talk faster than my brain can think, I start to mix words up, but the degenerates of our people, all right, they're the ones that are going to be left here in this fire. They're not going to be beamed up. They're not going to enter into the chambers, okay? Because why? Corruption shall not inherit, all right, the kingdom of the Most High. They have to be changed first. In order to receive the change, you have to be doing the will of the Father in heaven, doing the work, okay? As I live, said the Lord Yahweh, surely with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out will I rule over you. Okay, so you won't have a choice. And I will bring you out from the people and will gather you out of the countries wherein you are scattered with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out. Okay, with fury poured out. And I'll bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there will I plead with you face to face. Okay, plead means to judge. All right. And we don't know where the wilderness is going to be this go around, but we'll find all of that once we get into the chariots. Like as I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so will I plead with you, saith the Lord Yahweh Shai, and I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant, and I will purge out from among you the rebels and them that transgress against me. All right, I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn, and they shall not enter into the land of Israel, and ye shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh Shai. All right, okay. So there you go. The rebels are going to be purged out. Those that trespass against the Most High. So you think the Most High is going to beam them up and deliver them? Hell no, man. All right. Corruption shall not inherit the kingdom of the Most High. Okay, this is 1 Corinthians 15, verse 50. It says, "Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of the Most High. Neither does corruption inherit incorruption." So, in order for you to even make it on those chariots, you have to be changed. And in order to receive that change, you have to be adopted as one of the sons of the Most High. Okay? Brought back into his good graces. Being of that faithful seed of Abraham. Right? Believing in the resurrection, believing in Yahushua. right? Believing in this gospel, in this word, and enduring unto the end. Suffering as a Christian, not suffering as a murderer and evildoer, okay? So the 2/3 will be wasted here, okay? None of the wicked, as the wicked, as it says, none of the wicked shall understand. Well, none of the wicked will be delivered, okay? It's only going to be the elect this go around. So with that, I'm going to give all praises, honors, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakak, Wadash. Give it all the honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders, big millstone. A lot of peace, blessings, and salutations to the elect out there. Shalom.